For someone like myself, if I had around $3,000 to spend on audio gear, I could very easily consider a decent speaker system. Even if speakers were impractical, I could get quite a good desktop headphone rig for that kind of money. So when a manufacturer comes out with a portable player that costs over $3,000, it seems rather crazy to spend that much money on something like this. But for many people in places like Hong Kong, Singapore, they neither have the space for a significant system, let alone the time to sit down and listen with one. So for those people who want a full system and have the money to spend on one, a player like Cayin's new N8 is just what they're looking for. With easily enough power for most headphones and easily able to handle any kind of in-ear monitor, not only does it have a very high quality DAC and amp, but uniquely includes a Korg Nutube, allowing the N8 to become a portable tube DAC, amp and player. Let's start by taking a close-up look at it. As players go, this thing is a beast. I mean, it's very big and chunky. It's made of stainless steel. So remember when the Aston and Kern came out with that brass and stainless steel? Well, it's kind of like the stainless steel from that. I don't have an AK player here, but I do have a good old Cayin N8, which is a very large and not very curvaceous DAP, and it's not even as heavy as this is. Comparison-wise, they've got this little M9 is all I've got sitting around here. My AK380 is out on loan to someone else at the moment. But, you know, this is small and light, and then this is big and chunky. Oh, it's even thicker than the Cayin M. You can see there. You can't quite see the thickness because of the black back there. But you can get an idea. Speaking of that, you know, the back is covered with a piece of plastic to allow for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth reception. And you see these big, chunky brass knobs for the volume and power and switching. It's obviously supposed to be sat, you know, on a table and used. It's not something you put in your pocket, or if you're going to walk around with it, you'd hold it in your hand and operate it that way. So and in that you have 3 outputs. I'm very happy that this is the first player that I've seen so far, other than Sony, that's done the 2 outputs that I think should be the future: balanced 4.4mm and 3.5mm, and it also has a 3.5mm line out. Now the balanced can only be used in solid state mode, and the 3.5mm can be used in either, and you can switch it in software on the fly. And you have your home button, which takes you back to if you're no music playing, takes you back to this screen. If there is music playing, takes you to the now playing screen. So, and then on the bottom, as well as your micro SD card slot, you have your I2S digital output, which is only I've seen on one other DAP, which is the Sound Aware, and you've got USB 3. So you can use quick charge, and it will also use high-speed connection if you want to move the storage on and off the micro SD card. And this also acts as an adapter for SPDIF out as well, which is a first to have SPDIF out through the USB and not the line out. Now, speaking of that, and to the software, you've got your usual swipe down menu at the top. This software is designed by Hybe Music, or the interface, I should say, in the operating system, and it's custom designed to Cayin specifications. You have your usual kinds of settings here, but some are unusual. Your gain setting high or low, tube mode, which if you have something plugged into the 3.5mm socket, you can turn on or off. Two power modes, standard, which gives you more battery life, which is a clever idea. Why didn't someone else think of that? And giving you lower battery life, the higher power mode. Now the balanced out here can be used for headphone out or line out. We see there's an adapter in the box. And you have your Bluetooth on or off. USB mode, which can either be connecting to your computer, data transfer mode, or as a DAC. Then we have the SPDIF or I2S output option, and DSD can be switched between native D2P and DOP as required, which if you don't understand those things, don't worry about it. It's something that may only matter for a few people who are going to be connecting this as a digital transport to a DAC. This, I'm using version 2.3 of the software in case you're interested, so if in the future they've gone very far above the version of this software, then you'll know that I'm using an older version. Now you're wondering, there's something missing here. Do you know what it is? It's the settings, and they're hiding via a swipe up. Your music settings, we have your play modes, DSD output we've already seen, DSD compensation plus 6 dB, because most DSD is encoded with a drop of 3 to 6 decibels to avoid clipping, as DSD clipping is very, very, very bad and it should be avoided at all costs. Breakpoint resume is interesting. It can resume for the particular song you were listening to or the location in the song, which is a very good idea, I reckon. Gapless, which I accidentally switched off a second ago. Max volume, if you want to limit the maximum volume, say if you're always using sensitive IMs and you want to avoid accidentally bumping it up too high, like if somehow the volume knob gets bumped. The startup volume is good. It can either be what you had it at before, the memory option, or you can preset it. So for maybe if you're always switching between headphones and sensitive IMs, say a default of something like 20, so you don't accidentally blow your ears out. Fade in and fade out if you want that between songs. Replay gain is self-explanatory. The line output level, whether it is standard, medium, or high, I'm not sure what that comes to in terms of decibels or voltage. Be worth checking that up. Balance for people who require a left-right balance adjustment. The PCM digital filter, I noticed they use the same kind of DACs more or less as the M9, although of course, a player isn't just its DAC. And I noticed some sonic difference with the M9 with this, but given that it's fairly warm-tuned, it's not going to make such a huge difference. But if you're kind of wondering about digital filters, a quick guide which based on people who do design digital filters would be keep to the sharp digital filters for acoustic music, and the slower filters for electronic music is probably the most ideal. Or compressed music, maybe the slower filters. Sharper filters will give more of a sense of soundstage. Slower filters will not. May compress things a bit with the at least the AK DACs, but sharper filters are not so good with electronic music, where they may have very, very extremely unnaturally sharp transients. Anyway, the DSD filter, you want to keep that on narrow bandwidth. Anything much above your general hearing range of 20 kilohertz is mostly noise anyway in DSD. Equalizer is interesting. You have an adjustable equalizer, which if I have to switch on to adjust it, but you can adjust the various levels as required, or you can select a number of presets, which will give you some variation according to what they think is good, or just hit reset. Now, you can play through folders, play through albums, and have album art, whether you want that to show up or not. Album art didn't seem to slow anything down. If I just hit artist, it scrolls and it doesn't try and load album art until it stopped scrolling. So that's kind of handy. And it means you sacrifice one thing for another. I don't think anything I've seen loads really, really fast except an iPhone, and their Apple stuff is extremely optimized anyway. But the interesting thing is there is maybe some settings missing that you may have noticed. One of them is how do you scan for music? Well, that's actually hiding for some reason in the folders option, as is the OTG option. So that's more or less the user interface. Other than that, it's kind of fairly basic, which is good. And you can actually do some tap in things and edit, delete them, or add to playlists, which is a useful feature. You do have playlists in here, including recently played songs, which you can see there, and favorites, which I've just added one. Or if you have that's a playlist there actually. In all the songs, you can actually see whether they are high quality or DSD or high res. Don't know if there are any DSD that are going to show up on this list, but they like the high beam interfaces you've seen on other DAPs. Is much the same kind of deal. And once you start playing, hit this button, and you've got your interface with your options to change the playback, whether you have repeat or shuffle, and the playlist, what's coming up, as well as whether you want to add it to your favorites or add it to a playlist. So I can create a new playlist and then name it something as required. So other than that, you can delete it. So that's roughly the user interface. I like its simplicity personally. That's really good. And it seems to balance having enough features and enough simplicity. But if you're looking for something which has, say, Tidal and other software which you can install on it, well, that's not what's going to be possible with this, it seems. And it'd be pity, because it'd be nice to have Tidal or Qobuz offline mode in this kind of thing. one of the very cool things about the N8 is the range of connectivity that it comes with. So we have this balanced to dual XLR cable, so you can use it as to a home hi-fi system, for example. And you have a 4.4mm to 2.5mm adapter, so if you have some IEMs you need to adapt to the new 4.4mm standard. You have these two coax cables. Actually, one of them is interesting. It's a coax cable for Korg products. So if you have a Hugo 2, you could have a whole extremely expensive system where you can, you have your N8 for when you want to kind of have that warm, bloomy tube sound, and then you can hook it up to, say, a Hugo 2 when you want to use your music with a more precise, clear, and open sound, which is quite interesting. I remember way back when I had, did my Korg Hugo review, people were asking me, should I buy an AK240 to use the Hugos? Like, some people actually did that. So, crazy as it does sound, people do that. And it does work. The USB, the nice thing about it is when I hooked it up, the SPDIF connected automatically, and when I hooked the headphones in, I didn't have to switch backwards and forwards as I tend to do on the FIO devices, where you only have kind of one port for SPDIF and headphones, which you have to switch back and forth between. So that makes the N8 quite a beast of a thing. The only problem I did have is I did want to try like the Bluetooth receiving capability, which a lot of DAPs have nowadays. So I go into good old Bluetooth, and then I hooked up the N8. So I'll just put that back on then. So when I hooked on the N8, now I've got this set on LDAC. Now it won't receive LDAC at the moment with this current firmware, but it says it's receiving aptX, but when I play music, I don't get any sound. So I went back and switched this to aptX, and it said this was SBC. That doesn't make any sense. So it would have been very cool if it could have been used as a Bluetooth receiver, because then anyone could just hook up their, say if you have a friend come around and want to listen through your system, and with their own music, if they have it on their phone, they could have done that via Bluetooth. So it's a bit of a pain that it didn't actually work very reliably. So it's kind of been hit and miss using Bluetooth between all these devices to send and receive. It's been so far a tad more reliable on the FIO software, the Android-based software, whereas this Hybe-based software has been a bit hit and miss, and I found that with the other DAPs that use the Hybe-based software. But all the same, if they do get it working very well or more reliably in a future firmware update, I don't know if this particular one supports actually LDAC receiving, then it would work very well, because SBC sounds kind of, it's even Bluetooth receiving is going to be a step down in sound quality. So having something very expensive to use with Bluetooth kind of seems a bit kind of silly. I started off my listening with the N8 with the good old Campfire Audio Solaris, which turned out to be a good symbiotic match, as the slightly reduced kind of lower mids, upper bass worked nicely with the slightly bloomy sound signature of the N8. Of course, we're going for a kind of a euphonic sound with the N8 rather than a kind of accurate sound. So compared to something like the good old M11, albeit much cheaper, the M11 has that kind of open, clear sound that you get with stuff that's tuned to be kind of technically excellent, whereas the N8 has more of a kind of a bloom to the signature, a slight warmth in solid state mode, and that works out nicely, especially with slightly sharper sounding IEMs or headphones. Now, when you get into tube mode, that's where things get interesting, because engaging the Korg Nutube results in even more kind of a bit of a bloomy and in some ways kind of wider sound. I found the solid state mode is kind of fairly even, but just a touch on the warm side, whereas the tube mode has got more of that kind of tubey bloom. Kind of reminds me, although I haven't got it here for comparison, it reminds me a lot of Wu Audio's WA8, where it had that kind of really pleasant, easy listening, kind of bloomy sound that made everything else, if you listen to anything else afterwards, sound kind of cold and sterile. And this has a bit of that too in the tube mode. Interestingly, if you drop it down, if you put high power mode in, then you get more bloom in the tube amp. And of course, even with IEMs, where you're kind of unnecessarily sacrificing battery power for kind of a more bloomy kind of sound. And it made listening very pleasant. And the music I have here playing at the moment was a binaural album from Alexis Cole, who sings Paul Simon's songs, and it's available on HD tracks. It's a really very, very nice album. One of the ones I use periodically to test the quality of playback of various things from headphones through to portable players. And So it's got... So while I probably say it doesn't have as much detail as my Hugo 2, it wasn't dramatically greater than the M11, and it shows how much the law of diminishing returns is starting to come lower and lower and lower down. What this offers is, while it doesn't offer the features of something like this, I wish that the M11 had the sound of the N8, to be honest. For people who do have really deep pockets, like people I know in Hong Kong who just want, the best sound, and having all the features aren't necessary, such as tidal and all that, this provides a really kind of pleasant, bloomy, very easy listening sound signature. And especially if you're kind of the person who spends most of their time listening on the go, I think that's more of a preferable sound signature, as I found that background noise of any kind, even a slight amount that might creep through in-ear monitors, will kind of affect the highs the most and make them the most unpleasant. So that kind of sound signature is great for kind of traveling, relaxing, and not kind of like focused, super serious listening. With full-sized headphones too, the N8 is very, very nice DAP to use. It powers headphones with absolutely no problem whatsoever. And this again reminds me of the Wu Audio WA8 in terms of how it would just make everything sound really nice and pleasant. So one of the headphones I use, of course, the Focal Utopias, they're a little bit on the light side, so that slight kind of bloomy, tubey sound worked really, really well with these. Actually, and again, I preferred it actually out of the Tube Plus mode, which actually sounded more... I preferred it out of using the tube mode, which sounded more spacious actually to me than the balanced outputs. So in that, it's a puzzling device. Again, it's if you look at it and go absolutely no way at that kind of price, you can get cheaper stuff, as I said, which has more features, but not as nice sound, then it's definitely not for you. It's for people who, it's for people who, for example, they can't use Tidal or Spotify or Roon. Maybe they are in Hong Kong. Maybe there are limitations on the internet there. They need to carry their music with them everywhere. They're just not going to be able to do that otherwise. And it's for people who want the best kind of sound quality and stuff, and a sound that's going to make them feel really good listening rather than being the most technically accurate. So in that, they Cayin have done a really great job with the Nutube. I mean, you can only sometimes very, very slightly hear the ping of the tube when you're using it. And that, if you actually tap it, then you have to do that. Only very, very slightly, maybe when adjusting the controls. But when playing back music, you won't hear anything at all. The only thing you will hear is this nice, comforting sound, which just makes listening very, very enjoyable. So as things go, no, it's not good value. It's actually, I'd probably say it's pretty terrible value as things go. But I mean, with all the features they offer, with all the connections that it offers, as this is your one device and you can connect up to other stuff as well, in that it does a really good job as a high-end DAP. And it certainly feels and looks and feels the part. Again, it's going to be one of those things where people are going to cringe in horror or go out and buy one, and there's going to be probably nothing in between that. I mean, if you have to ask, can you afford it? So that's the Cayin N8, and I still think it's a great DAP, just not good. It's obviously just not good value. So I hope that was a good overview of the N8, and I didn't get to try absolutely everything out of here. And some things, as I said, the Bluetooth receiving didn't quite work as well, but of course that will be a degradation on sound in itself. But it was thanks to Cayin for lending me this all the same, and it's going back to Cayin after this, and now it's been on its little tour around Japan. So once again, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, and apologies, I have a cold, so my voice probably doesn't sound fantastic, do leave questions, comments, and constructive criticism. Please leave them in the comments below. If there's anything I've missed, let me know. Do you own one? What do you think of it? Did you try one? What do you think of it? Let me know. I'd be really interested to hear. And before you go, one more thing. Before you go, don't forget to check out my website here.reviews, where I have written reviews with great pictures of many of the products I've reviewed on video. Also, did you know that my videos are primarily supported by people such as yourself? If you consider buying me a coffee once in a while, or even a bit more generous and buy me dinner once in a while, not only do you get to support me making these videos, but you'll also get to see the videos in advance without ads and see my impressions on products way before everyone else gets to. I'll also let you go in the draw to win stuff out of my cupboard at the live stream every month, and you get direct access to me if you want buying advice or need help with audio purchases in general. So as well as joining our community of like-minded enthusiasts, you can help support make these videos. Head on over to amos.io/support and check out the options available. So thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you online.